looking at notes 5-7, solve quadratics by completing the square. So find the zero or zeros of each quadratic algebraically. So this is just like yesterday's lesson or video in that we're using algebra to solve or find the zeros, roots, x-intercepts, except before our quadratics were in vertex form. So when you're given a quadratic that's in standard form and you're asked to solve algebraically, that means your first step, other than of course plugging in 0 where you see y, is to get this quadratic into vertex form. So do we remember how to do that? So you're going to, of course, copy down the 0. And then remember, if you don't have this a value in front, your a value is 1, right? Then you're going to cut this b value in half because you're going to do a quantity squared. So that b value is going to become 1. You cut it in half and then you square it. And then remember, this is where you go off to the side and you think, okay, well, x plus 1 times x plus 1, how does that change my problem? Whenever you FOIL that, you get x squared plus 2x plus 1. Of course, when you do all the O and the I and the L, you get this whenever you simplify. Okay, so the x squared you want, right, it matches what you already have. The 2x you want, it matches what you already have, but you don't want this plus 1. So you drag down the minus 1 that's already there. And then, of course, to cancel this sucker out that you don't want, you subtract 1. You do the opposite. So then here it should be 0 equals the quantity x plus 1 squared minus 2. So let's double check. Okay, off to the side, we'll do our little check. Okay, so again, the quantity x plus 1 squared means x plus 1 times x plus 1, and then minus 2. Well, we already know that when you FOIL that, you get x squared plus 2x plus 1, and then drag down the minus 2. And so x squared plus 2x, and then that combines to minus 1. So yes, that checks off because it gets me back to my original. Okay, so once you've got your quadratic in vertex form, then you're ready to solve just like we did before. So of course you move over the minus 2, it becomes plus 2. So 2 equals the quantity x plus 1 squared. And remember, I like you to rewrite this. So we're going to have some Christmas colors here. Okay, so here we go. Rewrite, and you square root both sides. So the square root of 2 is simply the square root of 2. And then, of course, on this side, we get our absolute value of x plus 1. And then to get rid of the absolute value, you slap on that plus or minus on the left side. So we get plus or minus square root of 2 equals x plus 1. And of course, we want x by itself. So we're going to move over the plus 1 and we're going to put it in front on this side. So we'll get a negative 1 plus or minus square root of 2 equals x. And remember, I may ask you to find those decimal approximations if we're dealing with a graph, especially to verify our work. So look over that last video on how to do that if you need to. All right, next problem. So I think I'm going to get a whole new sheet of paper because these take a lot of room. So number 2. All right, we've got y equals 2x squared plus 12x plus 10. Okay, so I know there is a GCF, and we can have some conversations about this in class if you want. And you might be thinking some things, and hopefully you kind of are. But again, how we're going to do it today is like we've been doing. Okay, so we are going to factor out the 2, factor out the a from only the first 2 terms. So x squared and then plus 6x here. Remember, you leave that last term out of the parentheses so you don't factor out the GCF there. So now in this case, we haven't made this a quantity squared yet. So it's when you make this a quantity squared that you cut that b in half. So first we just factored out the GCF. Now we're going to cut that b in half because we're going to make a quantity squared. So this is going to become x plus 3. And then, of course, we're still dragging down the plus 10. So remember, this is like the problem before where you go off to the side and you find out, okay, I just altered this problem. I put this quantity squared and I have this 2 out in front. So you've got this x plus 3 times x plus 3 and the 2 out in front. So the 2 at first, I'm just going to drag it down. And remember, when you FOIL these two quantity squares, you would get x squared plus 6x plus 9. And then, of course, when you distribute the 2, you'd get 2x squared plus 12x plus 18. Okay, so again, you want the 2x squared. It's clearly in the problem. You want the 12x. It's clearly in the problem. You do not, what color did I use before? You do not want this plus 18. Okay, so to get rid of it, you subtract 18. Alrighty, so now you've got 0 equals 2 times the quantity x plus 3 squared minus 8. All right, so that's our vertex form. And like before, you really should either mentally or physically go off to the side and do your little check. Let's make sure it gets back to the original. So x plus 3 squared minus 8. Again, we just did this off to the side up here, and we know we get 2x squared plus 12x plus 18. When you multiply these through, that's what we got. And then we have the minus 8 we need to combine. So 2x squared plus 12x, that would combine to plus 10. Is that what we want it to be? It sure is. It gets us back to our original, so we're good. Okay, so now once you check that off, then we can start solving. So that minus 8 will jump across the equal sign and become a positive 8. And so we'll have this. Okay, and then of course we divide both sides by 2. So we get 4 equals the quantity x plus 3 squared. Then you know I like to rewrite. So we can square root. In this case, we get lucky. Square root of 4 is 2. This becomes absolute value x plus 3. To get rid of the absolute value, remember we have plus or minus 2 equals x plus 3. In this case, since we've got an integer here, when before we've been working with the non-integer values, now here's where you're going to split it up and actually find out what your two answers are. So you've got x plus 3 equals 2. And then x plus 3 equals negative 2. Remember, those are our two possibilities. We can either have positive 2 or negative 2. So then here we're going to get x equals negative 1 or x equals negative 5. All right. Not that I think you need it, but it might be good to kind of refresh if you had a problem like this. So I don't think I'll go through it all, but I would like you to remember how this works. Okay, so what if you had a problem like this? Of course, like I said, you plug in 0 where you see y, and then we can rewrite the problem. Okay, and so it doesn't bleed through. All right, so of course, if you've got an a value other than 1, you must factor it out of the first two terms. So this would become x squared, and this would become negative 8x, correct? Okay, because you're dividing by a negative 3 when you factor out from the first two terms. And then remember, once you factor out that a value, here's where you drag down the a, and then here's where you make that quantity squared. So when you make that quantity squared, that's when you cut that b value in half. So that'll become 4, and of course you drag down the minus 10. And remember, you need to find out how you just changed the problem so you can either add or subtract here to get rid of what you just changed. So remember, off to the side, you would have this negative 3 out in front with x minus 4 times x minus 4. So let's drag the negative 3 down, and you'd have x squared minus 8x plus 16. Is that right? Checking my math. Okay, now distributing the negative 3 in, you'd get negative 3x squared plus 24x, and then that's 3, that's 48. So this is negative 48. Okay, so now, of course, the negative 3x squared, you want. It's right here in the problem. The plus 24x, you want. It's right here in the problem. But this negative 48, you don't want. Okay, so remember, to get rid of it, you add 48. Okay, to get rid of a negative 48, you're going to add 48. So that's what makes this problem a little different, because that number here is negative in this case. So here we add 48, and we go ahead and do negative 3x minus 4 squared, and this would become positive 38. Okay, so then remember, either mentally or physically, you should really check what you have here to make sure it gets back to the original. So here we go. We just did this up here, right? And we got negative 3x squared plus 24x minus 48. So this, we just did up here, and we got this. Now you need to drag down your plus 38. And of course, when you combine, you get negative 10. Hey, what do you know? It matches. Yay. Okay, so check. You've done everything right. So from here, I'm not going to go through this part again. You would finish. All right, I just really wanted to show you this part. I think you're pretty comfortable and confident with this part. So no, you don't need to finish. You can write finish just like me.